We're good. We're good.
Okay, great. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, April 9th, 2020 Monomoy Regional School Committee District Meeting. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20. You can go to our website and join the Zoom meeting this evening, and the meeting will also be live streamed to our video channel and available to view on the website. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:32. First item on the agenda would be, before I move forward, I just want a reminder to be mindful of your background and to be mindful of when you're speaking, where you're speaking from. First item on the agenda would be the approval of the minutes from the March 26, 2020 meeting. Questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from March 26th, 2020.
Great. Any questions or discussions for the meeting minutes?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to do a roll call. Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mr. Osiello?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
And I believe that's everybody. And yes, motion carries. At this time, we offer an opportunity for public comment. Speakers limited to 5 minutes, an additional time at the discretion of the chair. Is there anyone for public comment this evening? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to recognitions, but Dr. Carpenter is not here yet. So we will move forward to the Harwich Elementary School School Improvement Plan update.
Okay. I'm just going to, this is the first time I've shared a screen on Zoom, so bear with me. Okay, everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. If somebody could monitor questions for me, because I can't see if any are coming over, because I'm just seeing this slideshow right now. First of all, I know that you received this presentation earlier today, and in the version that you got, my name was Mark Oldak instead of Mary Oldak, so I apologize for that, but it's a little bit of a tip of the hat to the collaboration that we've had across the schools in presenting data presentations that have a real commonality to them and how we're looking at student data, that I was able to start with the template that had Mark Wilson's name on it and work from that. So I did correct that. And as we move through this presentation, you will see some tweaks that have been made to the slides, nothing very major, but just what you have in front of you as school committee members might be slightly different than what I'll be showing you tonight. Before I get started, I really wanted to give a heartfelt, huge shark shout out to our combined Harwich Elementary and Chatham Elementary grade level teams. This year, we have been working together since the beginning of the year and combined PLCs, bringing Harwich and Chatham Elementary staffs together on pretty much every early release day to work on common goals. And that collaboration has just really paid off as our teams have been thrown into hyperspeed over the last 3 weeks, and they've just really dug in for their students. They're conquering these technology challenges and, you know, all while facing their own challenges at home, while we're all dealing with COVID-19, and many of them have young children that they're tending to while working with our students remotely, spouses that are working from home and all the complications that come along with that. So, you know, it's really embodied the sense of when we say we're all in this together. Our elementary teams really have been living that for the last 3 weeks. And I know Mark, Robin, and I just couldn't be more proud of everything that they've achieved so far, and as we continue on this journey. The first slide that we have here is I'm just going to really be giving you the big picture of who we are as a school population. As you look at our enrollment trends on the left-hand blue graph there, you can see that over time, I'm just really looking at total enrollment across the bottom there, that from 2015 to 2018, we've been remaining, we've had a drop there of about 50 students. That really has been brought about by a contraction in school choice, which is somewhat of a reflection of our drop in some grade levels from 6 to 5 sections. Since 2018, we've remained fairly steady around 550, 560. Right now we're at 558 this month. We have, if we look over at our subgroups, our EL population over time historically really has remained relatively steady at about 30, 35 students. We are now up at 40, 43. And what we're seeing really is a growth in the number of newcomers that we have. We have a very diverse range of languages. And it's interesting as we look at our English language learner populations, just even between Chatham and Harwich, how different the profiles are just one town away. If we look at the high needs numbers there in the right-hand blue chart, our high needs population continues to grow. We do see that it's climbing among all of our subgroups, and we have those percentages really, if you try to add them up, really don't add up because the high needs is a non-duplicative measure, meaning that if a student, say, is an English language learner and a student with disabilities, they're not counted twice in that high needs number there. So overall, we just see our school population remaining fairly steady in the mid 550s, and our high needs subgroup continuing to grow, and that's being driven across the board by an increase in economically disadvantaged students with disabilities and our English language learners as well. We're going to start delving down into our student performance data across several different metrics. We're going to be looking at our accountability ratings, MCAS, MAP, our attendance data, and our access scores for our EL students. So we get a nice cross-section look at how our students are doing. How our accountability ratings are calculated, I know that Mark Smith and Bill Burkhead have gone over this, and Dr. Carpenter has gone over this before as well. But it's just a quick review. It's a measure of our achievement growth in both ELA and in across our subgroups, as well as our EL progress, and also our absentee rate, which has been an Achilles heel for a lot of our districts. So this first slide is of the 2019 points earned. And we'll be looking at 2019 and 2018 because our overall percentiles as a weighted average calculated off of 2019 and 2018. So first we're going to be looking at our 2019, and then we'll, on the next slide, we'll look at 2018. If we look at the blue bar across the achievement total, we have all of our students, the total possible points is 8, and we're all of our students, all in, we're earning 6 out of the 8 possible points there. But what really is interesting is if you continue to look across that blue bar there, our lowest performing students really are very reflective of our overall student population. And that's really encouraging because those lowest performing students are the lowest performing on MCAS, and we know who they are. And they're not necessarily our students with disabilities or our EL students. They're just students who have not been performing where and they've been performing in the lowest range on the MCAS. So that is very encouraging to see that their points earned is reflective of the overall student body. If we look down to our chronic absenteeism right below the purple bar there, this is where we really, this is our tender spot, I guess. Absenteeism is the measure that the state chose as the state had the choice of what metric they wanted to use here for that additional indicator. And it's been very controversial across the state of Massachusetts because it is something that it's difficult for schools to really have an impact on absenteeism to a certain extent. So we earned 0 out of 4 points in 2019, and our lowest performing students 1 out of 4. So that is really the soft spot for us, which brought our criterion reference target percentage down to 70 from the previous year. Well, I think I might have jumped ahead a slide there. I'm sorry. So in 2018, I apologize, I just got that a little out of order. This slide is for 2018. Again, if you look at the very bottom row, our criterion reference target percentage was 79%. We were meeting or exceeding our targets. Anything over 75% is meeting or exceeding targets. And in 2019, we were at 70%. That's the slide that I just went over in more detail. So our final 2019 accountability rating was 74%, which was so frustrating because we just missed meeting and exceeding targets by only 1%. And that really was reflective of that soft spot in our attendance rate. So what we've been working on is we've been layering in attendance incentives this school year, which I'll talk in more detail about as we get to the attendance section of this presentation. But we were just so close and just missed it by that 1 percentage point. Are there any questions on the accountability rating?
Mary, this is Tina. So it sounds like you're going to talk a little bit more about the absenteeism.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, there's a section on absenteeism at more towards the end of this presentation.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that earlier. Okay.
Okay, so with that accountability rating of 74%, we were ranked 5th among the all Cape elementary schools, and highlighted in yellow are the schools that had an accountability rating higher than Harwich Elementary. I would really like to highlight Dennis Yarmouth and Ezra Baker at 95%. That is the highest accountability rating I have seen. And Meredith Henderson, our school committee member, is the literacy coach there. And Meredith has been very kind in supporting our staff with our efforts around improving our literacy model at Harwich Elementary. She's lent her expertise to me as a principal and to our reading intervention staff, and even helped our reading intervention staff create a PD offering that was supposed to start a couple of weeks ago, and we may still get it off the ground. But Mary came in, she helped us think through the organization of our guided reading room. She sat down with our reading specialist and talked them through the guided reading PD that they were thinking of offering. And, you know, I just think we're so fortunate to have her as a resource, especially when you look at the school that she supports and the numbers that are coming out of there. So thank you, Mary, for that. Okay, working into our grade 3 MCAS results. MCAS in the elementary schools really is a very different animal than in our middle and high schools. It's the first experience that our children have with tests of this nature. In 3rd and 4th grade, they're tested in English language arts and math only. And, you know, it's something that the kids are hearing about all along from older siblings and from parents. And I know when I taught 3rd grade, I would start off the school year just asking them about what they were excited about and what they were felt worried about. And inevitably, MCAS would always come up as probably the #1 thing that kids are worried about. And they would, you know, always pronounce it MCAS with the T on the end. And you know, I just know that it's something that our kids think about and or see as this big monumentous, stressful thing on the horizon in their lives. But the truth of the matter is, and we reassure the kids that this is, you know, something we've all been working towards and you've been developing towards ever since you've been with us in kindergarten. And just relax. And it's just, you know, the road we're on, and you'll be there before you know it. And it goes off without a hitch every year. We do share our results with all of our staff. I know Robin does this at Chatham Elementary too, because the teachers all along the way are invested in our children, and MCAS is, whether we like it or not, one of those public metrics that our school gets evaluated on and looked at across the state. And the teachers really can see and sometimes are quite surprised by the level of challenge in the questions that our kids need to respond to in 3rd and 4th grade. And it really just helps them build that sense of continuum of their contribution along the way in the development of our students' literacy and math skills. So this slide is grade 3 ELA MCAS for the past 2 years. Sorry, just going to turn my phone off. ELA for 2018 is on the left, and ELA for 2019 is on the right. And across each of those graphs, we have exceeding expectations in blue, meeting expectations in green, partially meeting expectations in orange, and not meeting expectations in red. When we look at results, particularly as we compare them across schools, we typically add together the meeting and exceeding because that's where we want our students to be. We want them really all to be exceeding, but meeting and exceeding is what we look at. So if we compare 2018 to 2019, we just look at the movement across the blues and across into the green, really the exceeding and meeting combination there. We can see that there's been a significant increase in the percentage of students meeting expectations. It's grown from 49% to 63% in ELA. And there's also been a corresponding drop in our percentage of students who are partially meeting from 37% down to 22%. That's been encouraging growth. In 3rd grade, we don't have student growth percentiles that you'll hear us refer to in 4th grade and in middle and high because it's their first year. So there's no past year in the cohort to compare to build a growth percentile. Our 3rd grade math MCAS for the past 2 years, again, the graphs are set up the same way, 2018 on the left, 2019 on the right. And we'll be focusing primarily on the percentages meeting and exceeding. We've had a slight shift in the percentage of students across the performance bands, not a tremendous amount of movement. And I think, you know, as I look at this and wondering about the lack of movement, I did look at the state averages. We do mirror the state averages with this. But as I always like to say to our staff, we are not average. There's nothing about our school that's average. We have phenomenal resources, talented staff, amazing families, and we can shake ourselves off of this average. Over the last year, Mark and Robin and I have been working on bringing in more focused PD into the grade levels for math and focus. Last year we started with 4th grade, and this year we're moving into 2nd and 3rd grade. And, you know, as teachers have had a few years now to digest the Math and Focus curriculum, they're really being able to ask more in-depth questions and really reflect upon their teaching with the coaches that come in from Math and Focus, and that's been very well received. So if we look at the grade 3 MCAS trends, again, over 3 years, we're looking at that 3rd row down under ELA and math, the percentage of students exceeding and meeting. And we see a significant increase in the percentage of students meeting and exceeding expectations in ELA. We also see in math just exactly what we just saw in the bar graphs, that the historical trend over time has been relatively more stagnant distribution across those performance bands. Look at our subgroups. It's very interesting in talking with Mark and Robin, Mark Wilson and Robin. We look at males versus females, and I know that other schools in the district really do see a discrepancy with males underperforming females. And at Harwich Elementary, we actually don't see that. And we have, if you look at the percentage of the males in ELA at 73%, and females is at 73%. The males in math have a meeting and exceeding percentage of 59, and the girls are at 38%. So it's almost a reverse experience at what we're seeing at some of our other schools. If we look at the more traditional subgroups across our economically disadvantaged students with disabilities and ELs, we see dashes there because the set size is too small to really report on and becomes very identifiable. What we do know about our EL students, our English language learners, is that our high proficiency EL students do very well on MCAS. Our first year EL students who are newcomers, do not take English language arts. They're exempt from that. However, they do still take the math test, which I find to be kind of an interesting decision on DESE's part, because our math tests are so language laden also. So that's just some background on how our ELs tend to do on MCAS. Overall, our students with disabilities are our lowest performing subgroup in 3rd grade. And we will see that pick up in 4th grade as we move and look at that next grade level. Okay, overall, as we look at the 3rd grade MCAS performance comparisons, what we did here was that we took the school districts across the Cape and then took the highest performing school from that district. For example, in Dennis, actually Dennis is not a good example because there is only one elementary school in Dennis, but in Yarmouth there are 2, Station Avenue and Emmy Small. Station Avenue is the school that we looked at because it was the highest performing one. In Mashpee, it was Quashnet. So we looked at the highest performing elementary schools from the districts across the Cape. And for ELA, Harwich was ranked 3rd with a combined percentage of exceeding and meeting at 73%. Eastham was at 87, and sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing around the corner of my slide there because of the video screen. And North Falmouth was at 85. Math, just like we saw in our school-based results, we are very much reflective of falling within that state average. We do see Eastham popping up as a high performing school in grades 3 and both ELA and MCAS. ELA and math, as well as North Falmouth. Those are schools that we could look to for what they're doing differently. Okay, moving on to 4th grade. This is when SGP finally comes into play for the first time for our students. And it's a really helpful metric for us to compare student growth. Average student growth, what we want to see is at least a score of 50 here. 50 is 1 year's growth for 1 year's period of time. And again, just like in 3rd grade, we have the 2018 results on the left, 2019 results on the right. We do see an increase in our student growth percentile from 43.7 to 48, getting closer to where we want to be. Still not where we need to be at least 50%. And we also see a positive shift in students who are meeting and exceeding from 2018 to 2019, that there's been a growth in students exceeding and also a growth in students meeting. But as we look more deeply into our ELA scores for both 3rd grade and 4th grade, our soft spot really is our open response questions. This is our major area of improvement. And it's really interesting when you think about what it takes to compose on a keyboard for a child of this age. We have done a wonderful job with Jim Birchfield's support and Katie Isernio's support of getting more devices into our schools so that kids, that becomes their normal of composing on a keyboard. We have in every classroom 4 to 5 Chromebooks just committed to those classrooms. And then in our 3rd and 4th grade, we have 2 carts, which are also shared just within those 5 or 6 classrooms. And then in K1 and 2, we have 1 cart for each grade level. So those have come in really handy in the last 3 weeks, haven't they, Jim? Yeah. Just a pitch that it would be wonderful to go 1-to-1, and we're, as we are in this virtual world right now, it's something that kids are really embracing. But when you think about composing online, composing on a keyboard, and all that goes into that, the transfer of what you want to say, and the potential block with your keyboarding skills, we do have, we do get the results and the actual input from the students. And this year we went over those in our data meetings. I was able to actually give the 4th grade teachers the printout of what their students wrote as 3rd graders on the ELA MCAS. And, it was quite surprising in a lot of ways. There was one young girl who wrote a screen's worth. I knew that it had taken her a long time. I remembered her from last year, that she worked and was one of the last ones to finish. And she actually got 0 points because she didn't answer the question. So those test taking strategies, well, just thinking about what exactly are they asking me, and being able to carefully construct a response. It doesn't have to be a screen length long, but you do have to answer the question. We also would have students that would write 1 sentence and then just click the next button, knowing that they were fully capable of doing far more than that. And, I think it's an interesting thing to think about in this age of video games, how we need to be teaching, we teach the children these strategies and how to transfer their knowledge and how, to really persevere in translating what they want to say into the keyboard. But, there is that video game mentality that I think some of them have to fight, of just clicking that next button and being done. So at this young age, those are the sort of things that we're still really working on with them. For Math MCAS for the past 2 years. Very exciting to see our SGP come above the 50%, and we're at 51.8 last year, 53.8 with this year's results. We have a nice positive 4% shift from partially meeting to meeting expectations. And that's the kind of growth we want to see, and a positive movement off of what we were seeing in 3rd grade. Overall, our trends, we across the board in 4th grade have been marching along from 41% meeting and exceeding to 47 to 55. We are above the state average with that. We also have in 4th grade the same nice steady progression, little up and down there, but on the upward trend. And the SGP is interesting there. In 2017, it was at 66.5 and has fallen off in 2018 and 2019. Okay, as we look at our subgroups here, it's very interesting distribution across the subgroups. If we just look straight down the ELA column here, we have a pretty steady showing here of students who are meeting or exceeding across the subgroups, being somewhat reflective of what all students are experiencing at 55%. We have our males at 52, females at 57, white students at 58, economically disadvantaged at 52. Students with disabilities, still very much an area of improvement, but a nice improvement over 3rd grade. We also have our SGPs looking across the board at these to be around 50, if not above. And for our economically disadvantaged, I think this is a really encouraging number to see right here with the SGP for those students of being at 59.5. That's definitely a subgroup that's continuing to grow. Our free and reduced lunch percentage is now at 45%, up from about 38 just 4 years ago. Okay, and if we look at our 4th grade as it compares across the Cape schools again, we see that Harwich Elementary would have been ranked 5 across the Cape compared to the other the highest performing schools from the other districts. And in math, even though that we had some numbers that we know that we can improve upon across the Cape, we would have been ranked number 2 with 53.9% of our students exceeding or meeting. Okay, so even though we do have our areas for growth, and we know that, and we're working on it, across the Cape, we're stacking up pretty well. Any questions on MCAS before I move forward? I'll take that as a no. Okay. Okay, our ELA MAP results, just to review for everybody, MAP is the measures of academic progress. We adopted this a few years ago, and it's been a wonderful resource for us for school-based testing. We administer it in the fall, the winter, and the spring in kindergarten through 4th grade. It's untimed, it's adaptive, and by adaptive, what that means is as a student gets answers correct, the questions get incrementally harder. As a student gets questions wrong, they get less challenging. So over the course of the test, the MAP is continually going out to their database and pulling in questions over the internet that are appropriate for that child and zeroing in on exactly where they are. What we love about MAP is that it measures growth. And what is wonderful about that is it really helps us focus on how well we're closing gaps for kids and how well we're differentiating learning to meet their needs. This is a report that the principals use to look at our schools across the grades. It's called the Student Growth Summary Report. This is the report from last school year, the fall 2018 to fall 2019. And what we want to see in this graph here is that these orange triangles, which actually are graphing out exactly what our projected growth was for our students, what we achieved, versus what the observed growth was. Okay, so I'm sorry, the diamond is the projected growth and the blue box is what our actual growth was. Okay, so we want the blue box to be higher than the orange diamond. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. My favorite measurement to look at on this graph is this column right here, the school conditional growth percentile. What this tells us is that it shows us how our schools are stacking up across matching schools in the MAP database. So we want to see these numbers. It's on a scale of 100. So, you know, when we see numbers that are in the 90s, that means that we're performing better than 93% of the schools in that sample. So we can see our growth across the grade levels, and it's very visual, and it's gives us a quick snapshot at how our kids are growing compared to what the projected growth is. So this was reading for last year, very solid. The projected growth, K's a little bit just hitting the observed growth. And if we look at this year, okay, this is you know, an area of discussion right here. Why is the first grade growth falling short of what the target is? Okay, and in our data meetings that we're having, this is where we're really pulling apart this information and looking at how we're meeting students' needs and how we're differentiating instruction to meet them where they are. Our math map results. Again, this is last school year, fall of 2018 to last winter, 2019. Okay, again, very encouraging. We see our observed growth meeting or exceeding the projected growth. And what we see over here in the school conditional growth percentile is a nice strong showing that's reflective of that as well. Now, just like we saw in ELA, okay, all of a sudden we see this area of concern pop up in second grade and in fourth grade. Okay, third grade, we're knocking it out of the park. Our observed growth is well over our projected growth. In kindergarten and first grade is meeting it. So these are the target areas that I'm really focusing on this winter is second grade math, fourth grade math, first grade ELA, and what is going on here. It's really been wonderful to sit down with the teachers for the first time in one-on-one data meetings with the teachers to be looking at individual students with the teachers and bouncing ideas off of them. I would like to also just thank Mark Smith again for helping us bring in the Math and Focus PD to help us address the issues that we're seeing with the math achievement and the math growth in some of the grade levels. Okay. This is also the focus of our goals for our PLCs this year is to be working on the common scope and sequence, common assessments across the schools so that we can really cinch up our coherence across the schools and across the grade levels, both vertically and horizontally. Okay, Tina, this is the section I think you we're asking about. So our attendance rate and chronic absenteeism, why does this matter? We all know, and research shows that students learn best with consistent, steady attendance and routines. And not nearly as importantly, but 10% of our school's accountability rating is based on student attendance. And students need to have fewer than 18 absences each year. And this has been our soft spot as a school. And it has been a difficult metric for many schools. We're going to next look at our attendance across subgroups. Our attendance rate for all students is at 95.2%. Our chronic absenteeism is at 8.8, which is a little higher than we would like it to be. We of course would like it to be 0, but it does run a little high. And we can see that our attendance rate is consistent pretty much across our subgroups, 95.2, our males at 94.9, females 95.5, and so on. Okay, we're seeing, whoops, sorry, I keep doing that. Everybody coming, all the subgroups coming in around 95%. When we start to look at the chronic absenteeism, however, it really does start to tell a story here. We have our chronic absenteeism with students with disabilities at 15%, as compared to all students at 8.8. It's almost double what our overall student percentage is. That's something that we're looking into. It does seem to be driven by a small number of students with very high absenteeism for a variety of reasons, but it's something we're taking a close look at. Okay, our attendance comparison across that same group of elementary schools. Our attendance rate is at 95.2. Our chronic absenteeism at 8.8. And across the Cape, we're the 4th lowest in this comparison group. Our attendance rate is definitely in line with the other elementary schools. When you see numbers like this, 19.6 pop up in Eastham, you know, you just say, wow. And I think, you know, when Eastham is such a tiny little school that it doesn't take more than a handful of students to really skew that data. So I think that that's probably what's going on there in Eastham. But overall, you know, we're showing that, yes, our chronic absenteeism is a little bit on the high side, but we're still the 4th lowest on the Cape across this comparison group. So to work on this, to work on our chronic absenteeism, in addition to the RTI plans that we all have in place for how we're responding to families and making them aware of the requirements for student attendance and truancy, and calling in the DA's office and cases where we need to for the keep them coming, or filing CRAs if we need to. This year, we just got back to basics and offered the students a perfect attendance pencil if they had perfect attendance in the month, and it's really paid off. We announced their names on the morning announcements. We have that first month, we gave away over 200 pencils in September. I had to get the PTO on board to help us out with that. And it's really been successful. And this is just the increase in perfect attendance across the months, but we have seen the corresponding bump in overall attendance rate as well. Certainly what we're dealing with right now with the COVID-19 is not sure how, I guess our accountability ratings really won't come into play this year because of MCAS and everything else, but it's been wonderful to see the kids so excited about earning their perfect attendance pencil.
Mary,
Yep.
this is Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
May I ask you a couple of questions on attendance, or do you want to wait till the end?
Right now would be great.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand. So the attendance percentage, it would be the number of students who attend school daily. So the attendance rate is 95.2%.
Mhm.
Is that the number
Yes.
of students who attend school over the course of 180 days? How does,
It's well, we calculate it on a monthly basis,
okay,
right? And we actually monitor it on a daily basis as well. We get those attendance reports as well. So we're keeping track of families who are having difficulties. So that's overall for the year.
so basically that's saying that 95% of the kids show up to school on average.
That's saying not that 95.2% of the kids, but 95.2%. We have 95.2% on average throughout the year. So it's not student specific.
Okay. My brain isn't wrapping it around what that percent is. I mean, chronic absenteeism, I get that's the number of kids. Do we have 8.8 kids in Harwich Elementary who have more than 18 absences in a year?
We have 18.8, I'm sorry, 8.8% of our student body who have 18 or more absences.
Correct. Okay, so I get that one, but it's just the attendance percentage. I can't wrap my head around where that number comes from.
If I can jump in, so it's like the averages on any given day, 95.2% of the kids were there
Okay,
as an
that's what-
average across the school year. So there
okay.
might have been some days that it was 93% of the kids were present. Other days it might have been 97, but if you were to sort of look at and spread it out over the course of the year, on any given day, as an average, 95.2% of the kids were in school and present.
Okay, thank you. That's where I eventually got to, but it just wasn't jiving with my brain wrapping around it. And then my other question is, you always hear about incentives to have perfect attendance, and then you have kids showing up who have the runny nose that probably should stay home, but they want to go to school or their parents send them to school. So do you ever notice kids that are coming to school that probably should stay home even though they have a head cold or something like that because of the perfect attendance? I always have a hard time with perfect attendance awards because you have kids coming in even though they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I have run into that. We did have one family that was very upset last year because their child was sent home with a fever and was not able to come back to school the next day. Even though the fever had broken, it was within the 24 hours and it was jeopardizing his eligibility for perfect attendance for his fourth grade year. I think our staff does a very good job of watching that, but I hear what you're saying in terms of, are we incentivizing poor decision-making?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's definitely something to think about. And I think we also have the situations where parents are sending their kids into school when they probably shouldn't be there because they need to get to work too.
Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand how important the attendance is, and I commend you for coming up with a plan that will work with the elementary school kids because they do want to hear their names on the announcements and they want to get that pencil and to have the perfect attendance. I just hope it doesn't have the opposite effect, especially in the situation that we're in now, where
Oh yeah, yeah. I think our
it's on the forefront of my mind.
definitely it's completely changed the landscape for this school year, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, Nancy. I think that's something we could give some attention to and rethink. Thank you.
And I'm
Mary?
sure that the chronic kids aren't necessarily being kept home chronically because of the sniffles and a runny nose, that they probably should go to school. I understand that a lot of the dynamic is that there's family vacations and such happening, and that's where the chronic absence is
I
coming
think,
from.
we hear there's all sorts of different patterns with families, and I'm sure Robin would share some light on this when she presents to you as well. We have families who their kindergartner is their oldest student, and they're just getting into the whole routine as a family for what it means to be up and at school every day and what that commitment looks like. We've had issues with families, EL families, of course, going home to Brazil or to China or Vietnam for extended family visits. Likewise, we have seasonal families that make their living during the summer and can't take vacation, and are taking vacations during the winter time because that's when mom and dad can get away from their positions. And then, there's also a cultural component too, with some families as well. So it really is very intriguing and interesting how the chronic absenteeism plays out. I don't really think that there is one explanation for it, as every situation has its backstory as well. Some families, dealing with some pretty significant family trauma with mom and dad, and that's how we find out about what families need and how we can best support them.
Very true. Thank you.
Yep.
Mary, this is Tina. I have a kind of a question too, because that line of questioning answered some of the questions I had also. But the other question, and I know this is tricky, but in your slide, it says chronic absenteeism among students with disabilities. And I know it's tricky because you can't really share the scenarios because maybe you're identifying, but I'm a little curious about what type of disabilities are you seeing with the absenteeism? I'm just I've got some hypotheticals in my mind, but I'm wondering how many of those might be a health disability or a learning disability. I don't know if there's a way to break that down without giving away information.
That is difficult to answer for the reasons that you just cited. However, my answer is that it is not reflective of medical disabilities typically.
Okay.
Social, emotional.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Mary,
Sharon, did you raise your hand? Sharon, you need to unmute yourself.
Hey, Sharon.
Yeah.
Sharon,
There you
you
go.
have an iPad and an iPhone going right now.
Yeah, I have to see it on one and talk on the other.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, my question is not about absenteeism. So if there are any more on that, that's fine. I have a question on academics.
Okay.
So I didn't get the paperwork early enough for me to compare the MAP and the MCAS results. But at the end, when you were doing the MAP, I could see that there was second and fourth grade had some problems with the math. And
Yep.
I don't know if that compared with the MCAS, but so if you see that, what do you do? Especially if you see a couple years in a row, the way this is done, you compare one group of children for third grade with a different group of children for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
But suppose there's a group that's having problems in second grade and third grade, or third grade and fourth grade, what kinds of things do you do to try to address that?
Okay, so let me answer your question by tracking back this second grade cohort right here that we're concerned about, and this is where we brought in the Math and Focus PD. Okay, the observed growth is the blue rectangle here. The target was the orange. So if we this is this year. So if we go back 1 year when these kids were in first grade, okay, their observed growth was above their projected growth. Okay, so to me, that signals that there's an instructional issue in second grade. And that's why we brought the PD in this year into second grade specifically.
You brought the PD in, you mean PD?
The Math and Focus professional development, I apologize for all the acronyms, Sharon. So the Math and Focus professional development was brought in this school year into second and third grade to help to address that.
Okay, but I saw that on fourth grade.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was on there for MCAS or just for MAP, but it was there for MAP.
So this is this year's fourth grade. Okay, at Harwich Elementary, and keep in mind this is growth. This is not achievement, right? This is the target growth that we want to see for our kids overall, and this is the observed growth. Okay, so this is this year's fourth grade. We want to go back, if you bear with me while I scroll back to their results in third grade. Okay, in third grade in Harwich, sorry. All right, our percent meeting and exceeding was at 50%. Okay, and we have that in red, and you can see how that compares across the Cape districts. It's very reflective of, I'm going to go just back another slide, Mrs. Stout. Okay. And this shows our, I'm sorry, one more. Here we go. Back to our last year's third graders in math. Okay. Was very reflective of the state average. Okay. So keep in mind, our kids are performing at the state average in math. Last year is third graders. So when we shift forward and look, and excuse me while I scroll back all the way through these. Okay, this is the same group of students in fourth grade. Now, keep in mind, this is growth that we're wanting to see. Okay, meeting kids where they are, taking the high achieving student, making sure they're still achieving high growth, taking the low achieving student, making sure they're achieving high growth. And it's about differentiating instruction to meet their needs. Keeping in mind that this group of third graders, this cohort of fourth graders, last year's third graders, were performing at the state average for math. Okay, this is looking at how we as a district need to meet their needs with our instructional models and differentiate to meet them where they are, whether they're high achieving, low achieving, or where they fall.
That's very helpful. So I guess the main thing that was confusing was that those little diamonds on the growth and how low it was.
Yep.
And so the MCAS is achievement and the MAP is growth.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't want to
Mary,
make you.
this is Tina. I just have one other question.
Sure.
How many, and I know Scott has mentioned this before, but how many languages are spoken at Harwich Elementary?
Yeah, that number continues to fluctuate. What I find to be very interesting about our EL population, Tina, is that we have a very diverse group of EL students from all over the world. And we have, you know, and this changes almost on a monthly basis, so forgive me for saying the word about. We have about 43 EL students right now in about 17 languages. Okay. In my previous career, in my previous position as a teacher, I taught most of my career as a third grade teacher, but I was an English language learner teacher in DY before I came over to Harwich Elementary as an assistant principal. And just, you know, one town away, 2 towns away, that student population is far more concentrated in the Spanish speaking countries. Whereas our EL population is much more diverse with the languages. And we have many, many students who are one of. We have, you know, one family from Iran, one family from Vietnam. It's just an interesting pattern that it would be so different.
Well, thank you for that, because before this one, I came from an urban school district. So that's something that would be very common in an urban school district. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
Terry, did you have a question? Unmute, Terry.
How's that?
Perfect.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm trying to get used to this.
Terry, you muted yourself again.
Okay, how's that?
Okay, good. Don't touch anything.
Okay. Mary, early on when you were talking about the kids, third grade kids in one-on-one computers,
Yes.
just for instance, for another year and a healthier fiscal question, what would it take financially, and probably it's also Katie and Scott, and to match up one-on-one with the kids in Howard with Chromebooks? I'd ask the same question to Robin. I'd be interested to just know how much money that would be.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to now. Somehow or other, it'd be kind of good to find out what it would be in 2 or 3 years to make that happen. Also, just as an observation myself, it is consistent with a lot of things in life that, speaking of this corona, that the kids who struggle with learning and are really having challenges with it, they're the very same kids, for a variety of reasons, who seem to stay at home more than the kids who are achieving. And that's kind of just an absolute given. That's no big shocker, but it makes it so much harder for your teachers to get that growth.
Right. And in both of our elementary schools, the first 2 weeks, what our EL teachers were focusing on almost exclusively was being sure that our EL families were connecting. Just did they have internet? Did they need Chromebooks? And even once we got them the technology, just making sure that they were actually connecting in morning meeting. And if they were there one day, why weren't they there the next? So it's been a real dedication of perseverance by our staff to really continually communicate with these families, because the children, oftentimes, not just our EL families, I mean, we see this with many kids, are really in a kind of more of a self-guided situation. And so I have to say, and I know Robin feels the same way, our staff, our guidance staff, our nurses and other support staff have just been hound dogging the the concerns around making sure all of our kids are on and all of our kids are consistently showing up for morning meeting and are working on their assignments. And it's, you know, just like it is in school when we're there physically, it's just been translated into the virtual environment in a way.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, and Jim, I know you and I have had conversations about what it would take financially. I think we're probably, in terms of the number of Chromebooks, maybe about halfway where we need to be to go one-to-one at this point at Harwich.
Terry, to that point, I think both the elementary schools are well equipped for in school with the cows. And in addition to supplying a one-to-one, there's a lot of responsibility that that has to be the kids have to assume. And the younger they are, we noticed, like with 5th grade, some of the Chromebooks that were broken last year. So it's also just an education of taking care of them when they're given out to individuals as well. But
Good point, Katie. Yeah.
But in the schools, I think that this district is very well equipped technology-wise with the the computers on wheels model. But, you know, like Mary just said, you know, we're about halfway there in terms of one-to-one. But under normal circumstances, and I think Jim would back me up, even if we went to one-to-one at elementary, we would be reluctant to have it be one-to-one that the kids take them home.
Yeah.
Except for a situation like this.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Okay, if there aren't any other questions at this time, I'll move on to our English language learner progress. Our EL students, English language learner students, must reach proficiency in 6 years. That is the goal and benchmark that has been set for us. And our EL students are doing really well at Harwich Elementary. We have on the blue graph on the left, the number of years in Massachusetts. So that's the number of years our EL students have been in residency in Massachusetts, not the number of years that they've been in the country, but the number of years that they've been in Massachusetts. Many of our EL students are born in America, but have parents whose native language is something other than English. So they're growing up in a bilingual home, which is a wonderful thing. And you'll see the distribution across the number of years in Massachusetts that we have. And again, because of the age that we're talking about, we're talking about 5-year-olds through 10 or 11-year-olds. So we do expect to see this distribution more skewed down towards the fewer number of years in the state just because of the age of the children that we're dealing with. Our proficiency tiers, if we look at the second blue graph on the right, we do see that most of our students are in the more advanced range, and we do have more newcomers is what we call them in English language learner lingo. Those are the students who truly are arriving to our country from another country, coming in with very little or no English. Intermediate is the students who are transitioning in their English proficiency, which includes reading, writing, and speaking as well. The test that the kids take every year is called Access. It's a national assessment that Massachusetts has adopted. It stands for Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State. And it's administered once a year to all EL students. And it's tiered depending upon their level of proficiency, except in kindergarten. So, for example, a more advanced EL student in terms of their proficiency in 3rd grade would receive a different test than a beginning newcomer student would. So in the orange box, we have the performance of our EL students at Harwich Elementary. The exit criteria overall is 3.9 or higher on the literacy assessment, or 4.2 for the overall composite. Qualifies a student from exit from EL services. That is, those benchmarks are something that we consider to be a little bit on the low side for exit criteria. We look at teacher feedback, we look at their classwork. We also look at, for a fourth grader, are they transitioning to a middle school? Would it be better to keep those supports in place as they are making that transition? But overall, our average literacy score for our students was 3.4. We had an average composite score, which includes the speaking and the writing, of 3.6. And of our 29 EL students who took the test, and that number's a little bit lower depending upon than our 43, just depending upon when students entered our school. 23 of them made progress. 10 of them did meet the exit criteria. And both of our students who had been in Massachusetts for more than 6 years had met the exit criteria. So they're doing very well. We have a very skilled and committed staff of EL teachers in the district. Cynthia Carey and Nancy Capon at Harwich Elementary, Megan Lampert over at Chatham Elementary. They collaborate beautifully together, and our kids are very well supported and are making really wonderful progress on their language proficiency. Okay. Any further questions?
Any follow-up questions for Mary at this time? I don't. Sharon, is your hand raised again? Sharon, you're muted. Nope, unmute yourself, Sharon. Can you? Okay, there you go. Did you have a question, Sharon?
I have no questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary. I don't think I see any more. Thank you,
Okay.
Mary, very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me tonight. And thank you for the opportunity to share our achievement data. We're very excited about everything that's happening at our school and our school community.
Great. We
Well,
appreciate your
see all
enthusiasm.
faces again.
Thank you. We are going to go back to recognitions now that Dr. Carpenter's here. Is that all right?
I'll just include them in the superintendent's report.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on, we're going to move out to the reporting for the finance subcommittee. Mrs. Scott?
Yes, the finance subcommittee met at some point. Could have been last week. It could have been 3 weeks ago. I don't really remember.
It was
Last
last
week?
Wednesday.
And we met mainly to talk about what we were going to look at in response to Harwich Board of Selectmen's comments on our budget and the assessment increase. So Katie presented some different options financially that we could try to reach down to the 2% assessment for the town of Harwich. And then we also discussed the potential for just kind of holding steady, because nobody really knows where we're at this point with the towns and their revenues and what they're going to be able to get towards us. So we discussed the option of how we could reach Harwich is 2% assessment increase. We discussed if we could reduce the budget to get there. We talked about using more E&D. I think we ended up with, it was a $130,000 reduction in 133, right? That's what I was going to say initially. $133,000 reduction in the overall budget to be able to get Harwich's assessment to the 2%, which is what they were requesting. We kind of came out of it with a bit of a mixed opinion as to whether or not we wanted to use that much E&D, because the whole point of E&D is for an emergency, and we're kind of in an emergency and we don't want to necessarily spend that. So we brought it to the full committee to be able to have a conversation about whether or not we want to go ahead and use the 133,000 more of excess and deficiency to fund the budget to reduce the assessment so that Harwich gets down to 2% or just under 2%. And that makes Chatham's assessment, Katie, do you have those numbers? Chatham's assessment is like -1%.
It would be negative 1.31%.
So from over last year.
Right.
So that's kind of where we left it. Is we all felt the ELA curriculum was an important endeavor. We definitely talked about the option, or we talked about the option of whether or not we would want to roll it out over a few years versus just going all in and putting it in at once. I think if I remember correctly, everybody agreed that we wanted to keep it as a full rollout. So at the committee meeting, or the subcommittee meeting, we kind of came to a more or less consensus that we would be okay using the E&D. Since then, there has been some other things happening or talked about with like Chatham Board of Selectmen and such. So I'm not sure if we want to continue into that, or that's just where we left that. So we left our finance subcommittee with using more E&D to get Harwich down to a less than a 2% assessment increase.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. At this point, we can open up for conversation or questions. You can raise your hand or wave to me if you have any questions at this time. Joanne, and then Terry.
If you had asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would say, no, go with, put in the English, put in the ELA program, and don't pull any money out, and don't go beyond what's been fair all along. Not knowing what revenues are going to be, and not knowing what the federal government might do as far as filling that gap for school systems. I'm still at hold it, just hold right where you are. The ELA program in all the way through, not piecemeal, and I probably wouldn't use the extra money. And that's where and hope that maybe grants will come our way. But it's so uncertain. I don't pretend to have the answer, but that's the way I feel.
Thank you, Joanne. Terry?
Thanks, Jackie. Am I coming across my voice?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Nance, for the summary. So this is the voice from Harwich. I think now is the time to move towards getting what the Harwich Selectmen asked for, getting us to 1.99. That would take $130,000 out of E&D. And as Katie said, and she knows the numbers, I think we're in pretty good shape to do that, even with what we're facing next year with the big question mark about local revenues. If we were to throw the 130 to get into somewhere that 2%, so that Harwich's balance would not need a town meeting override, I think it does two things. One, it signals that we're listening in a time that's critical. Admittedly, the same thing may occur next year, but also it allows us, or it leaves us with, I think, about $1.1 million in E&D, and I think that's a decent amount to move towards the next step of what we're finding with shortages of revenues next July or August or whenever we do find that. So I think that the select board that I listened on the phone 2 or 3 weeks ago, they asked Scott, and I think Nancy was there, to take another look and see if that can be accomplished somewhere in our budget. I think it can. I think it's wise to do it. It needs a vote of the committee, because then at that stage, whether it's 199, including our health benefits, I think we then can respond as we move towards the summertime with a clearer picture of just how much of a shortfall Howard or Chatham would have because of the corona, rather than wait for several more weeks for whatever we'd be waiting for, other than another call from the select board to say, have you had a chance to look over your budget? So I would recommend we answer that request to try to get to that too.
Thank you, Terry. Oh, Sharon? You gotta unmute it. Unmute, Sharon.
Where is that?
Oh, we got you.
There you go.
All right. So it's not that I disagree with Terry. I just, I'm wondering if we know anything more about the timeline. I'm a little interested in what Nancy had to say about the selectmen in Chatham. But now the town meetings are indefinitely postponed, and I'm not sure when all this needs to be done, and if we would be getting our information any particular time on what we're dealing with here, as far as the bigger picture. I don't mean just this piece that they wanted to get us to 2% or under 2%. Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, very much. I think that it's been my interpretation that it is not been officially requested at this point of what the Harwich Selectmen are looking for, but I think that in general, typically every year they're looking for a lower proposed budget than we voted for. At this time, you're right, Sharon, we have no timeline. Neither town has any timeline. And if in fact there was a somewhat of a request to meet that 2%, that was prior to COVID-19. So at this point, I feel like I don't want to be hasty with updating or revising the budget until we really know the larger picture of what everything's going to look like. And again, this is my opinion, but again, the request was prior to, and I'd rather wait and see really what we're dealing with after they kind of have a projection of possible revenues. When we're even looking to have town meeting, we have time. So I think there's time to still sit and process and see what the towns come back with, because it could be that they come back requesting more after they determine what they need than what they've already requested. And at that time, we really would need to relook at everything. And I just think we've already revoted the budget. And at this time, it's just not necessary until we really know the numbers that we're working with from our end and from the both towns' ends. You know, and at that time, we may need to go into our excess and deficiency to meet the needs of our district outside of what Harwich's budget requires of us. And in my opinion, that's what the E&D is for. It's unfortunate that we have to use it for something like this, but that is exactly what it's built for. Ms. Scott.
If somebody else wants to talk first, they can, but I just wanted to give a little bit because I didn't want to cut somebody off.
Is there a hand? Did I miss someone? Okay. I don't think I see anybody right now.
Okay, so the best of my knowledge, Harwich has actually set a delayed town meeting. I want to say June 22nd. So whether or not it happens on June 22nd, I don't know, but they have set their annual town meeting for June 22nd, and then their election shortly thereafter. I watched the Chatham Board of Selectmen meeting from this past Monday night, and they had a very thoughtful and thorough conversation about their budget and what it's going to look like going forward, and what are their different options if their revenue money coming in is decreased by certain percentages, and what that means in terms of where they're going to have to come up with the money. They talked about things that they can reduce in their budget to offset the missing revenue that's going to be coming in, or most likely coming in. They talked about going ahead and setting a town meeting for the June 22nd or whatever date they discussed, and possibly having a bare bones town meeting just to pass the school budget as well as an operating budget. And then they also discussed the possibility of whether or not, even if we're allowed to have a town meeting in June, if people are going to actually want to come to a town meeting in June, because are people going to want to actually be in that close of proximity? So will a town meeting actually be that productive, having it that soon? And the impression that I got at the end of the meeting was that they didn't make any decisions. They weren't asked to make a decision, but they decided to kind of hold off and wait, and possibly not even set a town meeting date until August or into September. So they were talking about whether or not using the 1/12 of their budget, or 1/12 of the FY20 budget, for starting on July 1st. Because the legislature decided that it was okay to not have a town meeting by June 30th, even though that's the end of the fiscal year. So one of their questions was actually what would happen. I didn't watch it live, I watched it afterwards, but one of their questions was what would happen to the school's budgets, both ours and Cape Tech's, if we didn't have an annual town meeting to approve our FY21 budget before June 30th. And my understanding from all of our conversations is we'll do the same thing that they do, which is use 1/12 of the FY20 budget starting on July 1st. But I found their conversation very enlightening to look at what our schools going to look like in September, first of all, but also what are the budgets going to look like on July 1st? And, is it the time that we start rolling out new initiatives, and maybe we look at having more of a trimmed budget? I don't know. It's just, like I said, they had a very, very thoughtful conversation. It was almost an hour-long conversation. Alex Halela did a presentation, and they asked some very great questions about what to do with their budget. And listening to that has kind of made me rethink why we just want to go ahead and put in the 133,000 from E&D now, knowing that there's going to be more conversations in the future. Or is it worth just saying, well, we know we're going to use some E&D because we need to, and let's go ahead and use the 133 E&D right now to start the conversation, because it's something that it's very important to Harwich that we get down to the 2%. But that's what I learned this week. So.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Jackie. Just a little clarification. I know I think Nance as well as Scott were present during the 2.5 weeks ago Board of Select Board meeting in Harwich. Some of us on the phone listened to it. Clearly, they voted not to support our budget that was being presented, 3-2. So it wasn't anything that they put off. In the spirit of that 3-2 negative vote, they asked Scott and Katie and the school committee to revisit the budget they had in hand and to see if we could reach 2%. They're in a distinct different situation with a $1.8 million shortfall than Chatham. Chatham can't go any lower. They're already in minus. So what I was left with that impression, as well as the finance subcommittee, is that Howard Board of Selectmen, they were looking for our superintendent to respond back to them not in the total big picture 6 months from now, but in the request to try to move from 2.34 or whatever it is to 2.0. And by doing that, as Katie's number showed us, we could do that by carving out from E&D about $130,000 plus that would satisfy that. It would even reduce Chatham's. Therefore, we would be on a level playing field and showing some sign of what we're all experiencing. Then in 4 or 5 months or 3 months, if the Howard's revenue projections match up with Chatham's, then we sit down at the table again and say, what is our impact? Because Howard is looking at this drop in revenues with fees and hotel and restaurant taxes. That is a second type of issue. I personally would not want to wait for that grand total to say, well, we've given you nothing other than $75,000 about a month ago, which obviously didn't satisfy their need. So we'll wait until this bigger picture develops. I think the 130 gets us to a stage in Howard where we're signaling that we're in this together.
Thank you, Terry. Mrs. Games.
I'm going to have to agree with Terry. We are Monomoy, and we are. And at the same time, I have an obligation to Harwich. And I am a little concerned. Harwich is carrying 75% of the budget. And I don't think we'll ever see a negative over on the Harwich side. And we've got a majority of the students. I think this is an effort. We are in this together. And I watched the Chatham Board of Selectmen meeting and listened to the conversations around the bare bones budget and the 1/12, budget. And so I just think, I'm worried that, we've got a Harwich playground tied up right now in CPA, CPC funds. And I just feel like if we don't take a step in this direction, I am a little concerned about where else it could get jeopardized. And that's just my concern. I am concerned also about the ELA, the curriculum. So I'm going to have to agree with everything Terry said.
Thank you, Tina. I just want to clarify, I believe in our finance subcommittee meeting, Dr. Carpenter said that the playground has no connection to this budget. And if the budget went to town meeting for a town meeting vote, I think that there could be an impression that people may vote, excuse me, against the playground, but there is no other connection regarding the school budget.
That is true. That is true. And thank you for clarifying that, Jackie. That is very, very true. I think though, given the temperature and given what is happening, you're exactly right. They're not wedded. However, I think that article, the school committee is Article 4 usually. And if that gets voted down, I don't know, I guess we go back to the 1/12 and is the ELA curriculum. If you go back to the 1/12, I guess, do we just toss the ELA curriculum in the air? Does it just get postponed? What happens? Does anybody know? Scott, I'm sure you do.
I think Scott's going to actually speak about the budget as well during the superintendent's report. So we'll get a little bit more information at that time. Sharon, I think you had your hand raised. And if you just want to unmute your iPad, Sharon. Okay.
Am I unmuted? Okay. So every time I hear someone talk, it makes perfect sense what they're saying. I think from the Chatham point of view, the waiting till later makes sense. But being from the Harwich point of view, I think I agree with Terry and Tina. that we should deal with the 170 or whatever it is to show goodwill and work together.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm just looking around. Joe, Mr. Osceola.
Thank you. And Sharon, some of your comments are echoing in my mind. Just a side question initially. It's our intention, yes, to pay bus drivers for the duration of this coronavirus. I'm assuming that our invoices will be less, but it's our intention to pay the drivers throughout. Can I just pause for Katie and Scott for a yes or a no here? So what are we doing with bus drivers? They're getting paid. That sounds like a yes. Wonderful. Thank you. I don't think we do see eye to eye with the Harwich Board of Selectmen. From what I've seen in the last few years, I doubt if we're going to, unless there's some significant turnover in the elections. To put it in a generous or charitable way, I think Harwich feels that Monomoy School District is doing well enough, is good enough, and there needn't be a lot of monies or, I was going to say effort. I think I'll drop the effort part. I don't think, as far as Harwich Board of Selectmen is concerned, I think they believe we are doing well enough, and the infusion of additional monies is less than urgent, that it would be something of a luxury. And that's distinct, I believe, from the Chatham Board of Selectmen, who are far more supportive of our efforts and the finance that attends to those efforts. So, but the practical point of this is, I think it's very likely we're going to see another request down the line coming at budget, which will again raise the question of our E&D, which has been, which has been whacked at about twice now. We may be considering a third because it will be forced upon us. I think it is not unlikely, I think, for Harwich to come back and say, sorry, we need you to cut one more because the town revenues are depleting. So we can head that off by a range. We have a range of bad options, I think. I don't think it's a good idea to remove from the E&D. I think it is a good idea to try and maintain the ELA curriculum. I think it's a good idea to try and maintain ELA curriculum. We have a difficult time. I think administrators are doing awfully well. Teachers seem to be responding positively and meeting the needs of students. The completion, the addition or the maintaining a schedule of an English language arts curriculum in the elementary school, I think would be an awfully important thing, both in terms of learning, but also for the morale of staff, the appreciation of process that has gone into this, and that it provides a very positive focus of growth and learning for staff and students. And I think the effect in morale can't be underestimated. At the same time, I fear it's a risk, because the English language arts curriculum, I think in total is about 450,000. If we put it off, we have a very easy fix for the Harwich. We call it requests. I think it's more of a demand. I realize sometimes you can't vote for what you want, but I am hoping against hope that we should vote for what we want, that we should withdraw money from the E&D take a deep breath and hope for the best. And perhaps we will find more cooperation from these boards of selectmen, about whom I am a little less than optimistic. So with some trepidation, some caution, some issues that are going to keep me up around 4 in the morning when I wake up, I would be in favor of what has emerged so far as a consensus from the subcommittee and what I'm hearing overall from most of us in the larger committee. Yeah, thank you for listening. I'm sorry I went on so long.
Thank you, Joe. We realize we're all in isolation and you might need to talk, so that's okay. I'm just looking for other hands raised with questions. And Terry.
Echo Joe's thoughts, and I have not mentioned the reading program. As I understand, I'm totally in support of it, in combination with relieving what is the Howard Select Board's goal for 2%. I see it a win for us on one side, and my impression, and Katie can reinforce it, that money built in, I think, was $120,000 towards out of the E&D for the reading program. I would like to see that stay intact, and we purchase that in a 1-year process. So the kids K through 4 get that, and Howard gets 130 in order to get us to 1.99.
Thank you, Terry. So I'm just looking to, Mary, Mrs. Henderson.
I just wanted to agree with the fact that I feel that it's important to roll out the ELA curriculum all at once for the collaboration piece and the morale piece across the district. I think that's really important. I was at that Board of Selectmen meeting and they were pretty quick to say they wanted to see us do something, you know, to get down to the number they were hoping for. In that, you know, 2%. So if we were to take that money out of E&D, I can't remember who said it, but kind of puts us at that level playing field right now. And then moving forward, all districts are going to be affected by this COVID-19 in some way. So, I mean, I'm sure that the towns are going to come back to us again, but I think I would like to see, you know, the ELA curriculum still happen all at once, even if that means that we have to take that 170, I think, more out of the E&D. So that's just my 2 cents.
Tina?
Yeah, and I want, because I know we had this conversation 2 weeks ago as a committee, and then, of course, in the finance subcommittee. So I also want to say, I think we all the Harwich folks were at that meeting. And I know in particular, Selectman McCaskill pulled out that ELA curriculum. So it's on his radar. And I don't want to see the ELA curriculum. I think we've all voted on this. We all agree that we want to see it implemented in full. And I do worry that it'll be put back on the chopping block. Of course, that's for us to decide, certainly, but the town of Harwich gets to decide whether or not they're going to give us the money to begin with. So I don't want the ELA curriculum to kind of get caught up in this. And I feel like exactly what Terry has said, and I think Meredith just said it as well. I think this is a good gesture on our part. It shows that we are in this together. We are a community, and all of us here, we're taking care of our kids, we're taking care of our community. And I just think this is the right thing to do, to take it out of E&D. Let's move forward and let's just see what comes next. And just that way we get our ELA curriculum and we've fixed this too. So I just have to echo that.
Thank you, Tina. I'm just looking around again before I talk. Ms. Scott?
No, you go first.
Okay. I'm going to try and go screen to screen so I can kind of address everything. I think that Tina spoke to, and she and I both spoke about kind of the implications of our budget going to town meeting. And my comment about that is I feel like right now, especially with the rollout of the e-learning, there's a lot of energy, positive energy with our taxpayers and families behind our district right now. And I think that is going to have a large payout when you go to the town meeting, if we had to, if it, without the support of the selectmen for our budget. I think that Katie and Scott thoughtfully put together a budget every year. And much applause to Katie as well for finding kind of what you call nooks and crannies in the budget to kind of make everything work. And I think that when we initially go to each town with our budgets, they are responsible, respectful, fiscally sound budgets. And I think it's normal to go back and revisit those budgets to find comb what's going on with them. And I think we've already done that once. I feel like Harwich every year comes back obsessed with assessment. They come back obsessed with 2% or lower. Nothing's changed. They do the same thing every year. They do the same conversation about our excess and deficiency. Every year they ask for more of us. And I struggle with that because I never feel supported by them. I feel like we are an educational institution, so there should be no question behind the ELA curriculum. That's what we're here for. We're here to support the students and do the best job that we can with it. And if that needs to be in our budget, I think that it would be really hard for them to argue that that money could be spent better elsewhere, or that money could be used to reduce their percentage in their budget. I feel very strongly that those were all things happening prior to COVID-19. And I feel like the COVID-19 is being used as a crutch to get them where they wanted to be, or they suggested they wanted to be in their last selectmen's meeting, when they have no idea what they're going to need at this point. So I don't think that it's in a good, and Terry said it really well, a good gesture. I don't think it's a good gesture to, and I'm not trying to mix what he said, it was a good terminology. I don't think that we need to give a favor at this point by getting them there to that under the 2%. I think we need to wait and see what the reality is of what their expectation's going to be. Because whether we get them to their 2% or under their 2% now, or we wait, the ELA is on the chopping block either way, because we still don't know what they're going to need after they decide what their revenue looks like with COVID-19. I just feel like we're skipping ahead too soon when we don't really know what's going on. And apparently my son has something to say too in the background. I apologize. Wonder where I get my aggression from. So I just feel like I'm very apprehensive about this. I just think as a committee, it would be responsible to hold tight right now and just really wait and find out, and then reach out with our good gesture to be like, okay, we heard what you needed to get your percentage with. Now we realize what you're looking at for your revenue and what's happened to the town. Let's look at it in the big picture, and let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do to support you. But I don't think this nickel and diming and giving them a little bit here just to suffice them. I really think they have bigger concerns right now, and they're going to come back to the table with another number. And I think we should be prepared for that other number as best we can. But right now, I don't think matching what they need is going to make a difference either way. And I'm done. Joe, I see you shaking your head.
I think you said more vigorously and robustly what I was trying to articulate when I said that Harwich Board of Selectmen feel we're doing a good enough job. Hence, we don't need to put in more money for programs because we're already pretty good enough as it is. You stated it a little more, as I said, a little more vigorously, and I share those concerns and those worries as well. And yet, I really I don't want to see ELA curriculum on a chopping block, quite the contrary. I think it's a building block and should be seen that way. What we may have to do in the future, I'm not sure. I'm going to try to, the position I would put forward is that we do meet the request of the Board of Selectmen of Harwich. That I feel we have to. There's not a lot of options for us. And then if a further request comes, we deal with it at that time as creatively as we can. I'm not sure we're going to be able to escape bloodletting of some kind, but I don't want to start chopping off our fingers in anticipation of what may come in the future. Meantime, I'd like to go forward as much as we can. However tentatively I may feel about it, I think we should still go forward and try to present a very positive, not only vision, but substance for our schools in the coming months.
I'm scared, Terry.
Well put, Jackie. One, I give us all credit for spending the time to kind of walk around this issue. And there's never going to be a perfect thinking straightforward regarding A, how much of B, and carrying the loads. I would say this, and I again agree with the way Joe put it, it's the best of a difficult situation. My feeling when I used to work, if I requested something from somebody, central office or a staff person, and then I'd wait for weeks and weeks to get it, even if the answer was something I was agreeable with, I wouldn't like that style at all. 2.5 or 3 weeks ago, the Board of Selectmen in Harwich voted 3-2 not to accept our reasonable, decent budget. They then, two of them, Steve Ford and Larry, signaled to Scott, and through him us, to go take another look and see if it's possible to find some sums of money that would get us to what the other departments in Harwich were carrying. And that ended up being, I guess, 2%. Rather than wait until the big enchilada hits in 2 months with shortfalls of revenues because of Corona and give them the answer that, well, we were waiting for even the worst news. I would think it's a two-step. One, we decide to give that amount out of E&D and signal Scott or Katie to call over to Joe Powers in the next week or so to say, here's what we found and here's what we can do for you. We're at 1.99. And we'll all be in touch in another couple of weeks or a month to talk about the future potential revenues and address that as it comes to our table again. So I just think that's the more appropriate way to respond to their request of 3 weeks ago, because our wait could be 3 more weeks, 5 weeks. Then they've got the high road to say, took you long enough to get back to us. So I just think if we're going to be compelled to really do this, I think that we've given enough time to, discuss it and then send a signal through Scott with an A and nay vote.
Thank you, Terry. And of course, I'm going to rebuttal to that and just say that we could also give a phone call. I don't want to come off like I'm trying to be rude or anything. I do feel like eventually we're going to have to do something. COVID-19, their request, absolutely. But I feel like the responsible thing to do would be to communicate to them, look, we heard what you said. We're going to figure something out. But we also would like to see how this all pans out before we start moving things around in the budget, because you're probably going to come back to us with something else. So we want to be prepared for that. So at this point, we're going to work something out, but we want to see what the big picture looks like. And that can definitely be a conversation that we have with them. And absolutely, they deserve some feedback from us. I don't disagree with that at all. And I just, back to Joe, about the curriculum, I feel like the curriculum is kind of the target this year in our budget, unfortunately, because I think a lot of people look at it, lack of a better word, as fluff. And I think all of us understand it's the core of what we are, and that's why we're here. So because it's the target, I feel like that's why it's the one piece that they're going to try and pull apart or pull out or make us move around. And it's our job. And as Joe said, it's our job to make sure that stays in there somehow, some way. And I really do think that we will be able to do that, and we will be able to support that full rollout. So I just wanted to add that. And I think Mrs. Scott wanted to talk.
Unless you want to let Dr. Carpenter go first.
I don't pay attention to him. Oh, there he is. Okay. Dr. Carpenter.
I would agree with Terry. I think that you need to look as a committee at a two-step process. At the end of the day, I need to be best positioned, and and the committee needs to be best positioned to go into those ultimate conversations that we're going to have with the selectmen after they figure out what the final impact of COVID-19 is. And I think this is this is a time that we can take guidance in the immortal words of Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, that you can't always get what you want. If you try sometime, you just might get what you need.
Miss Scott, that was awesome.
I don't know if I can follow that, but so I have all sorts of thoughts, and I pretty much agree with everybody. Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everybody else has said. I have always had a hard time with Harwich asking for us to reduce their assessment more, regardless of what we come at them with. That has frustrated me for the 9 years that we've been doing this, 8 years, something along that lines. Everybody else looks like they're frozen, which means I might be frozen.
You are frozen, Nancy, but we can hear
Okay.
your audio.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you're all moving again now. I'm in the corners of my basement away from, just keep waving so I can know that you're moving. So I always have a hard time using the extra E&D to come meet with what their requests are. And I have kind of twofold thoughts to say that it makes me feel better to say we should go ahead and use the extra 133,000 of E&D. Step one, we are almost guaranteed, I can't say guaranteed, we are almost assured to know that there is going to be a further request to reduce our assessment to the town of Harwich, if not Chatham, due to COVID-19. So this is kind of like Scott was saying, it's a stepping stone. So we know it's going to come. So we're starting with step one and taking this, and they might hopefully be more willing to work with us, knowing that we took this step of getting them to the 2%. I also have thoughts that there could be additional funds left over from the FY20 budget that will eventually come back into our E&D at the end of FY21, at the end of next year, because we're not spending as much money right now. So there could be additional funds coming back. So those two are making me feel better to say that I think we should go ahead and use the additional 133,000 in E&D towards our budget, even though it really goes against every grain in my body.
Joanne, I see you over there, Ms. Sheehan, and then Tina.
It's a pattern of behavior since I've been on the school board. So it's been 3 years that it's been, could you reduce, could you reduce? And I think that kind of rubs me the wrong way, because to equate it to what's going on at this moment, that wasn't when the request was made. That's fine. If we have to be flexible, we have to be flexible. That's the way it goes. I guess I wonder how committed we are to the English language arts program, because I'm very committed to it. And I hate to see that go too. I mean, the money from the E&D, fine. But as far as the kids and the education that they get, they deserve to know exactly what's expected of them when they get into school. And that takes an introduction of a program from first grade straight through fourth, and not piecemeal, and not maybe this year, maybe next year. We've got to be somewhat committed to that, I feel. Be flexible. I suppose we're going to have to.
I think it was Tina first.
I wanted to say, I really appreciated watching the Chatham Board of Selectmen meeting, because the whole concept around a bare bones budget was very interesting to me. And I started thinking, and don't want to put this out there, but I started thinking and wondering, if we didn't do what we're hopefully doing here in consensus, it sounds to me, but if we weren't going in that direction, my one concern, I haven't yet heard Harwich talk about a bare bones budget, but if they moved in that direction, depending on the receipts that were coming in from, taxes and all kinds of monies that they're going to be losing, I was wondering and scratching my head thinking, now what if Harwich says, we're going to look at a bare bones budget? My concern with that is I don't think it would include the budget that we have presented to them. Based on what I know to be the history of Harwich, and particularly right now, I'm not convinced that they will consider the budget we put in front of them as bare bones. So I just didn't want to go in that direction. I was just really struck by that conversation with the Chatham Board of Selectmen, and I'll be following closely Harwich now, because they've been meeting like every 2 or 3 days, and I'm kind of losing track on all their various meetings, but I'm going to try to follow it closer. So I just wanted to say that I really want to avoid a conversation about the bare bones budget, because I just am very, very concerned about what that means for the school district. And, I just didn't even want to go down that rabbit hole. So that was my other comment.
Terry, just yes, absolutely. But I just want to say that power in Chatham is flickering right now on and off. So for Leah and myself and anyone else in Chatham, you may be noticing it. If for some reason Leah loses power at the middle school, we're going to lose live stream in the meeting. So just don't be alarmed. And we'll probably try and just get it up and running as soon as we can for all of you who are not flickering. Go ahead, Terry. Unmute, Mr. Russell.
How's that? The reading program K4, I totally support rolling it out next year, writing a purchase order of the amount of which would be $120,000 from E&D that we talked about for the last month and a half. Frankly, I think by offering to get to our 2% via the Harwich needs would strengthen our issue regarding the budget. And I don't intend to even argue, and I would go to bat for it if any of the Board of Select people raised in Harwich. Now, what about the $120,000 of E&D to buy the kids K through 4 a reading program? I find that a far stronger defensible position to say that's our business and that is going to be committed, because if we waited on that, the resulting corona impact will probably put that off for 2 or 3 or 4 more years if we waited. So I would think it might even be to our advantage to, in another week, satisfy the need of the Harwich without even getting into the reading program. And then if it came up, seeing that we're committed to it, as I think we all feel.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. Just looking around the room for any other hands. Mr. Osceola.
So one, anticipating some future concerns, I won't go too far down that road because it's hypothetical. I can anticipate, as Nancy suggested, there will be some monies coming back into the budget. I suspect our fuel costs and transportation will be a bit less. I suppose we're not spending as much on substitute teachers. Bus drivers won't be paid to go on late night bus rides or field trips or athletic events and so on. But when you total all that savings, I just don't think it's going to be a number so significant to be, to use the sports cliche, a game changer. I just don't think it will be. And I don't think there's any fluff in our budget. A couple of meetings ago, a couple of months ago, I said I believe we have a budget that is terrific and reasonable. It hasn't added anything that is less than defensible. We haven't put in what some people in towns call luxuries. It isn't in the budget. It's a strong, solid budget, and nothing should be taken from it. Nor should the E&D be reduced further. But we're in a different situation. So to pull it together, I think we might need to give some thought to a dean of students in the high school, as opposed to, say, an assistant principal. I don't know if we've thought about that yet. So I would love it if Bill Burkhead and Scott have some conversation about that, about whether it's even moderately feasible, or to kind of brainstorm the possibility of it. And I think we're going to have some, we have to prepare for some vigorous defenses for the kind of rumbling we heard in previous years that we haven't heard now. For instance, we've hired a community outreach coordinator a few years ago, and that was brought up as if it was something extra and excess. It hasn't this year. Instead, the concern, I think, has been more to a big ticket item like our ELA curriculum. But if the selectmen come back at us, and I'm thinking particularly Harwich, and say, all right, more needs to be done because our revenues are cut, we need to reduce departments at all aspects of the town. I think we have to be thinking of how we can defend what we have and make cuts that are less painful. And for that, we need to think. I don't know, Scott quoted Jagger Richards. I was thinking of, which I appreciated, particularly because some of Sharon's comments were making me think of Jimi Hendrix with the reverb, and I like that as well. I think it's somewhere in the Peloponnesian War comes the comment that good leaders are most needed when it comes not to victory, but retreats and defeats, and that there's an art to retreating well. And I just want to stop there. I think we're at the point where our admin team should continue brainstorming, perhaps even more deeply, on the art of a retreat, so that if we are called upon to do so, we can defend the positions we have as best we possibly can and as effectively as we can, knowing all along that that budget that was first presented to us some months ago was a damn fine budget in the first place.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. There aren't any other questions. Joanne?
Just a quick clarification. I said 1-4, I meant K4 ELA.
We won't hold that against you.
Okay, good. Because I was trying to remember that 5th grade wasn't in it. That's where I was.
All right, great. Lots of information today. Great conversation, and lots to think about for our next meeting. Next item on the agenda would be the accelerated math pathway.
All right, that's me, Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment for the district. So quickly, just want to give you a little context and a little sort of, this is the way we were going and this is the way we've had to respond given the situation that we find ourselves in. So committee may or may not be aware, but a decision was made. So actually, I'll be back up even a further step. Committee may or may not be aware that we have an accelerated math pathway, which starts at the end of 6th grade, where students are selected coming out of 6th grade to start in an accelerated pathway in 7th grade, which accelerates the 7th grade curriculum, gets into the 8th grade math curriculum, so that in 8th grade, they continue in an accelerated course that continues 8th grade and then gets into algebra, so that by freshman, they're able to take geometry, which ultimately allows them to take a pathway to advanced mathematics, either AP Stats or calculus. A decision was made going into this year to unlevel 7th grade. So we sort of posed us with a new challenge. So we were in the process of exploring a couple different options. The one option that we were seriously considering was instead of compressing the curriculum between 7th grade and 8th grade, looking to compress the curriculum between 9th grade and 10th grade. So just combining different courses together and having it happen a little bit later when the kids were a little bit older. However, that was all predicated upon a conversation we were going to have with the Department of Ed. They were actually scheduled, their math content specialists were all set to come down to a meeting that we were going to be having at the Cape Cod Collaborative on March 16th, which, as everybody remembers, is the first day that we were no longer in session. So that meeting never happened. And that left Bill and I and Jen Police and Mark Wilson in this place of trying to figure out exactly what it is we are going to do, because we were looking to get a lot of information there to help us finalize our decision. So after some back and forth, what we've ultimately decided to do is we're in the process currently of triangulating data from 5 different data points. So we'll be looking at specific parts of the students, so our current 7th graders. We'll be looking at specific elements of their MCAS scores that relate to algebra. We'll be looking at their spring MAP scores, or actually, no, yeah, because I think Mr. Wilson is still looking to run the MAP assessment. So it's either going to be actually, I think it's the winter MAP assessment. MAP has a correlation, not to get too far into the weeds here, but one of the scores you get out of the MAP scores is what's called a RIT score. And they have a correlation chart that, at this score level on a RIT has shown through comparative studies that they've done that these kids, from here and above are ready for algebra. So that's those 2 points. There's an algebra screener that MAP offers. The current grade that the student had at the close of the 3rd quarter. And then the 5th data point is the 2 math teachers at the 7th grade reviewing the list that the data brings up and making final recommendations for the 8th grade. So we will continue to have an accelerated pathway in the 8th grade. It's just starting, I guess, a little bit later. And I think, I would know better in a couple of days what the actual numbers of kids are going to be. Mr. Wilson and Mr. O'Shea were working on running all that data with just this week. So I had originally planned to sort of talk about looking at compression at a different place, looking at that 9th, 10th grade, which would have combined algebra and geometry, algebra 1 and honors geometry into a course, and then had geometry and algebra 2 in another course. But that's all been put on the sideline because we just, like I said, we were ready to sort of collect some good information to help us make an informed decision. And then the world went to on a handbasket, and but we didn't want to lose track because we've done a lot at the high school, and I had nothing to do with it. So we, as Bill's team, have done a lot to boost the number of kids taking AP courses at the high school, and specifically within the math department for this conversation. So we didn't want to lose ground on that. So I think we found a good solution to ensure that we can continue that progress. And I just wanted to give the committee an update and answer any questions.
Mr. Russell.
Nice to have a new change of topic. Mark, I might be a little foggy, but the 7th grade, are kids identified, and I may have missed your response, in order to move a group of kids who've been recommended by 4 or 5 steps to the 8th grade algebra, do we have now, or have we thought of having the 7th grade identified as a pre-algebra section in the middle school? Or are those kids heterogeneously mixed, and at the end of their 7th grade year, the components of what you refer to a pre-algebra test, their names get caught up and sent over to the high school for 8th graders? I only say it years ago, we used to have a pre-algebra section, or actually sections in the 7th grade, that gave us a heads up for the kids who would be 8th grade in my building to be Algebra 1.
Yeah, so it was up until this year, there had been like they called it advanced math in the 7th grade, but yes, that's essentially the same concept of what you're talking about. They were heterogeneously, this year's 7th grade was heterogeneously mixed though. So that course sort of went away. So we were left with how to respond. So we've been talking about it over the course of the year. I've been working with Bill and a lot actually with Gen Police at the high school about, you know, what could we look like to make sure we don't lose opportunity for students. And we're actually looking, because one of the disadvantages, we were only getting about 20% of our kids into advanced math courses in the 8th grade, and really didn't feel like that was representative. We were looking to try to open and broaden the opportunities. That's where the conversation was at when we, ran into the situation where we found ourselves. But again, we didn't want to lose ground, so we've pivoted and found a way to, I guess, put a Band-Aid on the problem this year, so that we can better plan for next year.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just looking around. I don't see. Oh, I'm sorry. There she is down there, Mrs. Scott.
Thanks, Mark. Is this so you're looking to do it going forward this way, or is that just for this particular cohort?
Yeah, so it's a good question. What we're doing right now is to manage and monitor this cohort so we don't lose an opportunity with this cohort. We have to figure out what to do. And, we've got a compounding problem now where our 6th graders, while we're doing a lot to offer remote learning, we're not likely to complete the 6th grade math curriculum, which is just sort of gonna that's K-12. We have to think about that problem, K-12, but and it's not just us, it's across the state. So I, quite frankly, if I'm being 100% honest, I have not yet to wrap my head fully around that problem. Every time I think I have a solution, I have a conversation with somebody else that makes me realize I haven't thought about something. So to be continued.
Okay, I just wasn't clear if this was just the Band-Aid because of the current 7th graders, or if it was, I guess it sounds like it was a conversation that was going to happen for going forward anyways. And it also just happened to be a Band-Aid for this situation.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, and we've sort of looked at three different options. One would be to go back to what we had done before. I have some concerns about it because we're making decisions about advanced math placement coming out of 6th grade, which I think is really early to be making that determination. And the system that we were using before was based a lot around their computational understanding, which is okay, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one correspondence between whether or not I'm a good algebraic thinker and whether or not I have good computational skills. Those two things are not necessarily hand in hand. But we were making our decision based upon one starting in the 6th grade. And, having a 5th grader and thinking about a decision being made for him that's ultimately going to affect his ability to take calculus in his senior year next year, that's I think each of us, as we find ourselves in different life stages, right, we think about how little he is now, and that decision being made at the end of next year seems early. But then I was actually a really big proponent of combining the 9th and the 10th grade. And I'd heard about some districts doing it, and I was trying to get more information. But then some other folks brought about sort of the denseness of those two subjects, and that that's a lot of material to put into 2 years. But around and around we went, and we were really looking to go to this meeting to help us suss it out. And I'll be 100% honest, you know, being in my position where I'm not a math person, and I'm relying on the expertise and perspectives of the math people in our district, they also have their sort of own bias that they bring into the conversation, right? So I was really looking for an outside perspective to help round out our conversation. So yes, we were planning on it. Yes, we will continue this conversation once we get back to some level of normalcy. But we also recognize we needed to do something with this group right now.
Okay. In my previous life, I guess a lifetime ago, my daughter's lifetime ago, I was the middle school and high school math teacher. So when I was teaching middle school, there was all the talk about whether your brain had developed enough to be ready to do algebra, and that develops differently in everybody. And then I also have my high schooler who is in algebra 2 currently, and the thought of combining breaking up geometry over 2 years, that kind of just doesn't resonate well. But also, I have the 6th grader, so I could see the identification looking at him. Is he ready to go into an advanced? So I see it all, and from my math experience, I can see both sides to it. But like I said, I was just curious whether or not it was looking to do this going forward or just the Band-Aid. So,
yeah, and just to clarify, when we were talking about combining like algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 over 3 years, that wasn't going to be the pathway for all students. It was going to be for students who are looking to a pathway to get to ultimately get to AP Calc.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I'm just scanning the room one more time, and I don't think I see anything. All right, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda would be the subcommittee reports. First reading of file IHBAA guidelines for classroom program observations. Looks like Mrs. Cernio has a question.
You skipped something.
Did I? Sorry. Oh, goodness. I'm so sorry. Reports and discussions, item number 5, awarding of a contract for student web filtering software. Ooh.
Hi. Thank you, Katie Isernio, Business Manager, and I'm going to ask Jim Birchfield to jump in and talk about this as well. I know that the protocol is really to present information at one meeting and then vote the next, but because of the timing and the sensitivity and the need for this particular network licensing web filtering software with our remote learning, I'm going to respectfully request we could move on this. And I just wonder if Jim could just sort of speak to exactly what the need is and what it is that we went out, we got quotes, and I provided the backup information in your packet.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Jim Birchfield, Director of Instructional Technology. It's a web filtering program that covers all of our Chromebooks, so basically all the remote devices. And it filters the internet 24/7. So all the kids that have Chromebooks at home, they have like a filter on them so that it protects them from bad things on the internet. And it's basically used to keep us in compliance with the Child Information or Internet Protection Act. And we've been using it for years, and it's just, we're coming up to a contract renewal right now. And I think the one thing that's different this time is just that it's, we're looking at a 3-year contract for the service. And typically we would do 1 year, but they're giving us, we're getting up to like a 15% discount by doing it over a 3-year period. But we don't have to pay for it all up front. So it's basically broken down over 3 years, but we have to sign the contract now. So that's really what this is about. It's been in the budget. It's in the budget for next year. So it really, it's nothing new, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's definitely a very important tool and service that we've got to provide. Legally, we have to provide it, especially when we're sending all these Chromebooks home. That's basically it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you, Katie and Jim. Are there any questions for either of them? Ms. Scott?
Make a motion. I move to approve the contract with Amplified IT for $40,345.50. This is a 3-year contract with $13,448.50 annually for licenses for web filtering software to be used district-wide. The licenses will be for Securely, which is the leading solution in keeping children safe online at school. Parents can get the same peace of mind when school devices come home or are at home currently and see their child's online activity in real time.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Mr. Osceola,
In favor?
Ms. Sheehan,
Yes.
Mr. Russell, unmute.
Yes.
Sharon, unmute.
Aye.
Ms. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Aye.
Ms. Games,
Aye.
aye. All in favor, motion, excuse me, a motion carries.
Question,
Yes.
Jackie, seeing that vote, it triggered something. Our elongated but good conversation regarding our E&D and transferring money and directing it towards the needs of Howard. Does that need to come to a vote this evening, or we put that off for 2 weeks? So
We don't have a vote required at this time. I think because it was the first time the other committee, my opinion, the other committee members have heard of it. Let's give them some time. It also gives time for Dr. Carpenter to go back to the selectmen, like you suggested.
no. So we'll put it on the agenda for our next
Yeah,
meeting.
we can, yeah.
Good enough.
Okay, good. All right. If everyone can just mute their mics again. And we're gonna move on to now the subcommittee reports for file IHBAA. Who's presenting that tonight? It's first reading. Does someone from the policy subcommittee want to present that tonight? Am I gonna have to? Oops, Sharon, you there, hon?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do not have it in front of me, of course, because it's on this device. But the whole policy was written, and we received a copy of that last week. It's pretty detailed. It talks about having, if somebody's going to come in to observe, there'd be a staff member also going in to observe. There may be times that wouldn't be good in the calendar, for instance, MCAS times, where somebody wouldn't be able to be in there. They're asking for if some outside evaluator does observation evaluation to present that 10 days ahead of time. At the same time, the school would present theirs to the parent. There's a lot of different details that we've read before.
Okay, great, Sharon. Does Tina, does anybody have a question about the policy? Any comments regarding the policy as it's written and presented tonight? We will vote on it at our next meeting. Mr. Osceola?
Yeah, the policy largely has to do with students in special education and the rights of parents in the process of determining the best needs for their children. Sometimes parents want to have an outside evaluator make assessments and judgments that could influence the ed plan. Sometimes parents might want to come in and observe for themselves. And so this sets out a protocol, sets out a procedures for that to occur, that tries to strike a balance between the legitimate rights of parents, the needs of students, concerns of staff, and so on. So it's it's a good policy to have. It is thorough. I think it anticipates a lot of situations. Please read it carefully, and I'm in favor of it, and I hope we adopt it at our next meeting.
Tina?
Hold on a second. Is that me or is that Sharon? Oh, I just wanted to say that we vetted this very well. Talking on the policy subcommittee, we have 3 educators. I guess one is a former educator. I am not an educator, but I feel that this was very well thought out, vetted, talked about, and I would invite everybody to please read through it, and hopefully you will approve it next meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions? Ms. Henderson, you okay over there? I think someone just scared her. All right, great, thank you. We will definitely put that on the agenda to vote for at the next meeting. Now, what you've all been waiting for, drum roll please, recognitions and superintendent's report, because every minute matters.
So I'll go attempt to screen share here. Of course, I'm on a computer I don't do Zoom on, since my my computer did not want to allow access.
You might be burning it out, saying.
Can put a help desk ticket in on that one, Scott.
Well, you're out in the galaxy, so maybe the connection's bad.
Mm-hmm. Raise of hand of who's had dinner yet. One person?
Who was
2
that?
people, 3 people. No, Mark, you can't raise your hand twice.
Can you see my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, so so I'd like to go thank Marcus Coffey sent me a cute little picture the other day, just wanting to thank all of our teachers for providing a little remote learning. So I thought this would be a nice one to go share with you. And then you're having a bad IT day when Joe Osceola is picking up the phone to call you to give you coaching on how to get on to the school committee meeting. And I was also getting calls by Terry too. So so I was having a rough time. So Zoom and I not friends today. I want to just give Mark Smith a brief moment to speak and just say where we're at in the middle school principal search.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So we conducted, oh God, it feels like 6 years ago, but I think this has all happened within the last 10 days. We had first around, we had 24 applicants, which we culled down to originally 8 and then further down to 7 candidates that we brought into interview. I've been chairing a team that includes 3 classroom teachers from the middle school, a guidance counselor from the middle school, a community member, a student representative, 3 parents, and 2 principals from the district. And we interviewed 7 candidates virtually through a Google Meet setup over Monday and Tuesday night, not of this current week, but the week prior. That got us down to 3 finalists who we've had over the last 3 days. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, each of our 3 finalists participated in our best representation of a community forum. Traditionally, we would have brought the people in and had them sit like in the auditorium or the cafeteria and brought a few different groups of folks in that would ask them questions and then provide the interview team with feedback. What we did instead is set up a virtual live stream where parents and so we invited 3 groups: students, parents, and staff at 3 different half-hour increments to virtually meet the candidate. And there was a process. I had set up something through Google Slides where they could submit questions. So essentially, it kind of played out like a podcast interview, where the questions would come in. I was there. I would ask the questions to the candidate, and the candidate would respond back out to the community, and the community could see the candidate, going out in a live stream. And then after each candidate, they were provided with a feedback survey. So that we just had our last one tonight. And then what will happen is early next week, the interview team will get back together, look over those results, determine whether or not all 3 candidates, or we reduce the candidates down to a smaller number. We'll move to our final round, which will include a virtual site visit where we will essentially do a deeper look into the references. I'll have a list of folks that we need them to set us up with to talk to and learn more about them. And then the committee will work with the superintendent to make the final decision. So that should be within the next week or 2. We're rubbing up against the April vacation, so that might get a little tricky, but we're continuing to move forward at a pretty quick pace. We want to make sure we don't lose any viable candidates.
Thanks, Mark. So in terms of the budget, I know a lot of people, or this evening, I know Nancy had mentioned this concept of a 1/12 budget. So on the 3rd, the governor put into place an act that would allow towns to seek an ability to go operate if there's not a town meeting that could go and approve their budgets. And I think even pulling town meetings together in the late June might be challenging for them. We have to keep in mind that our budget that we're looking at for FY21 is a 2.41% increase over the prior fiscal year. So a 1/12 budget ends up being a budget that is the current FY20 year's 1/12 of that budget. So that would leave us month after month 2.41% shy of where we want to be with what we wanted to accomplish next year. We do have some things that we need to get some clarity on. We don't have clarity from our towns yet on what we should be looking at for a real budget number, given the shortfalls that they're projecting or anticipating. We also need to get some clarity from the legislation on how regional school districts can access their excess and deficiency during this crisis. So if we look at how short are we on a 1/12 budget, we would be about $82,000 short per month. And that's a lot of this is now presuming that our FY21 budget is a real budget number, even if we bring it down to a 2% increase, because I think a lot of us are worried that our towns aren't going to be able to support that 2% increase. So I think until we get guidance from the towns, this becomes a little bit of a wild card for us to address. One of the things that I want to just kind of put publicly out there and make people understand and know is that on April 2nd, we went and sent out our annual letters to families who have applied for school choice to let them know if their child next year will be able to attend one of our Monomoy schools and a free seat that we have available. As of April 2nd, with all of the kindergartners that are in Chatham that Robin was able to go and find, we only have 11 resident children from Chatham who have signed up for kindergarten, and we do not anticipate more than that 11. That's down from 27 this year. We had 27 in the previous year, and we had been in the 30s prior to that. There were 7 school choice children that applied to Chatham Elementary School, 6 of them from Harwich. We accepted all 7 of those, so that brings us up to a Chatham Elementary kindergarten cohort of 18 students in one classroom. This means that we're going to have one teacher who we will have to move from Chatham Elementary School to Harwich Elementary School. We have a Harwich Elementary School teacher who's not returning from maternity leave, so that so that everyone will still have a job and a position, but we'll have to shift one person from Chatham Elementary to Harwich Elementary. We have at Harwich Elementary School 97 children from Harwich registered for kindergarten, 6 opted for school choice to Chatham Elementary School. We accepted only 2 of the applicants at Harwich Elementary School for school choice. Both of those had siblings already at Harwich Elementary School. That gives us 93 total children at Harwich Elementary School, divided between 5 classrooms, gives us 18.6 kindergartners on average per classroom. So that's, again, using school choice to equalize those numbers. But I think we're going to have a lot of folks in Chatham, and I know in Chatham select boards, when we've gone to their meetings in past years, it's like, oh, well, can't we just have, open it up to school choice from Harwich? Well, we did. We accepted every school choice child from Harwich that had applied. So we don't have enough kids to merit an additional classroom in kindergarten. There are some major concerns that educators at Chatham Elementary School are starting to express with having just one section of kindergarten. And you can imagine that if you have just one class, and for the next 5 years, your children are going to be in that one class with that one cohort. At times, their kids, you'll have some kids in that classroom that don't gel together. There's not an ability to ever move a child to the other classroom or to separate 2 children. So it's, so there are some concerns over that. One suggestion that somebody made, and I said we can't and won't, is why can't we just send all of the kindergartners over to Harwich Elementary School? There's room. And and that's not something that we do, but I think I think gets at some of the concerns that they're having about not having more than one classroom of children at the kindergarten level. In terms of our distance learning and how we're operating during this time of social distancing, we did a parent feedback survey on the initial 2 weeks of distance learning. I think all in all, I was quite impressed with parents' responses. The vast majority of parents, felt that we have been, or were satisfied with how we had been responding to the school closures and to how our distance learning was going in those first 2 weeks. Most of the parents found that the directions for distance learning were understandable, and they had a number of students, or a number of families felt that there was about the same workload for their children in distance learning as when they were coming to school. 30% felt that it was a little bit less than usual, and then there were about 10% that felt it was more than usual. The 10% that felt it was more than workload than prior concerned us, because ideally, if you're in a distance learning environment, you can't replicate what's happening in the classroom. So so we needed to start working with some of our staff and look at how we could tweak our distance learning model to hopefully reduce the number of courses that students are juggling at the same time, and to sort of limit the amount of material that students are working on. We had, the vast majority of the feedback that we had gotten was very positive. There were some comments, those were, that had sort of suggestions on how we could improve things. Those were probably less than 10% of the total number of respondents. Probably the biggest concern they had was that a rotating schedule that we were using the first 2 weeks was confusing. There was some inconsistency of workload. There were concerns on, were we giving students with IEPs or struggling learners enough support? And some just wanted to see longer face-to-face times with their teachers. We concurrently had virtual meetings with the faculty at the elementary, middle, and high school levels to get their input as we shifted into a phase 2 for distance learning. And when we have put out our sort of phase 2 that we negotiated with our union, we still maintain this face-to-face connection, which was a big priority of ours. We stopped the rotation of the schedule so that hopefully it'll provide a little more sanity for the kids and families on that. We do have our teachers teaching now in 20-minute blocks of time, which is longer than what they had before. They had been at the high school and meeting with their classes for about 12 minutes. And at the middle school about 15. So there's more time at that middle and high school level. There's the teachers still have office hours to go and give students support. We have reduced the number of courses by 1 on average that students are having to juggle in any given day. There's still social emotional check-ins. There's an ability to go and do this asynchronously if you can't be at those face-to-face meetings. And we also are shifting towards, at the high school level, having assignments graded and having this be something that can actually help students on their transcripts, and are being clear with students that their participation in online learning is not an optional thing, that they can actually lose course credit if they're not doing anything when it comes to distance learning. So all of that, the new distance learning will be rolling out when we come back after the little Easter vacation. In terms of our grab and go meal program, today we had 644 bags of food distributed, which really gets at a wonderful wonderful outreach from the community to go get the food. And just to put this in perspective, each one of the bags on the table pictured behind the Easter Bunny had 4 days worth of food. So so they had Thursday, they had breakfast and lunch for Thursday, for Friday, for Saturday, and for Sunday. So there's 4 days worth of food in each one of those bags for a child. We would like to provide, in terms of recognition, special thanks to Jeffrey Shortis and Jennifer Connors and Ann Poppleton for their generous donations to help support the Monomoy Food Services program to provide help for families in need. And we would also like to give a shout out to the Harwich Community Center, which went and diverted some of their resources. So typically the community center puts on an Easter egg hunt each year, but because of our social distancing, the Easter egg hunt wasn't possible. So what they did is they generously opted to bring the egg hunt to families and to hand out bags of pre-filled sanitized eggs during Monomoy's regular grab and go pickup this morning. More than 300 bags of eggs were handed out to families for the children to enjoy. And we had an appearance from the Easter Bunny. So to put the meals that have been distributed into context, each day we've been giving out between 206 to 644 bags of food to families. Remember, each one of those bags is a lunch and a breakfast. On Friday of last week, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Today it was for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So all totaled in the last 2 weeks, we have distributed 7,122 meals to children, and I give our great cafeteria staff a lot of kudos for putting together all of those breakfast, lunches, and dinner. Last but not least, we will have an April vacation. April vacation will be April 20th through the 24th. We will still be providing meals over April vacation. And then one last thing, the last day of school will be June 23rd. I think I need to correct that in the document that we're working with on the teachers. I think it says 22nd, but it's actually the 23rd is should be our last day of school for this school year. And we do anticipate, given how this is playing out in a lot of other states, that that will be distance learning from now until the 23rd. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter, and thank you to everyone who's been pulling this all together and make this happen for our district. It's truly incredible to watch and witness something to this magnitude. Any questions or comments, discussion with anything that Dr. Carpenter presented? Tina?
Yeah, Dr. Carpenter, going back to, let's see, Chatham Elementary School, the concern about the the concern about the kindergarten going to one classroom. I was curious if that concern is such a big one. I guess what would the other option be? To open it up to more school choice kids? That would be about 12 more kids, right? In order to have 2 classrooms?
I mean, it's good. It's a good question. The reality is that there aren't school choice kids that have applied. So we took in every child that applied to school choice. 6 of the 7 from Harwich. So there's not a viable cohort of children to populate a classroom. And if I don't think it would be fiscally appropriate or educationally appropriate to split that 18 into 2 classrooms of 9, and to be seeing 2 classrooms of 9 at Chatham Elementary School for kindergarten and 5 classrooms of 18 at Harwich Elementary.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, it's interesting to look at that. If that trend held up, and I can't remember what my number was, if that trend held up, then that would put Harwich at carrying about 90% of the kids in the district. So when I saw that, I kind of was looking at the numbers. So hopefully that trend will adjust at some point.
Well, hopefully there'll maybe be a lot of babies after, all this happens. Who knows? You never know what's going to happen. But I'm really happy to reopen Pandora's box about an upper and lower elementary school district. I know we've talked about it in the past, and Mrs. Scott's going, no! But Tina, you weren't on the committee at that time, but there has been discussion, and there's definitely some more we can talk about for that topic. Any other questions for Dr. Carpenter? Terry, and then Joe. Terry, unmute.
If there's ever a silver lining for us as a school department in this pandemic, Scott's initiative is clearly it. The way the staff has responded, and then this food lunch program, all it will do under these very trying times is just pay all of us and the teachers tremendous dividends. So kudos back to you, Scott and Katie et al.
Thank you, Terry. And then Mr. Osiello.
At least a few of the superintendents on the Cape and right off the Cape, I think Wareham would be one, are holding classes through April vacation so that it's not so vacation is canceled and we're going and holding classes. At least some superintendents are doing that. Could I just hear more about your thinking on why we're maintaining a vacation at this point? I'd just like to know more about that.
Gladly. So, so part of it was going into this. We really didn't lose a beat. When the schools got closed down, we immediately spent the next several days devising a strategy to go distribute Chromebooks and to make sure that we got a Chromebook to every elementary school family that needed a Chromebook, and got the Chromebooks to our middle school families, while putting together a strategy to distance learn that really, I think, showcases the power of face-to-face in this virtual world. So while some school districts are still waiting to get distance learning off of the ground, for instance, Barnstable will be starting theirs this coming Monday. We've been doing distance learning for 3 weeks now. That's after having those first 5, we'll call it 5 snow days. So for our staff and for our families, they haven't actually had a break, especially for our staff. They haven't had a break. I think what we've heard from our teachers is that there really needs to be a chance for them to go and catch their breath, because we launched into this at a full run, and I think others are catching up to us. And I think it's the districts more that are trying to catch up with this, that are using that April vacation time to to sort of close the gap.
Is that good, Joe? Cool. Just looking around to see if there's anybody else with questions for Dr. Carpenter. Terry.
Just a comment in stark contrast. Emery and I was chatting with our daughter Courtney in Hong Kong. They started on the 17th of January. The school did. They have a schedule where both of them happen to be teachers at high school. They're on the computer with their classes for 5.5 hours a day. And there are some teachers who needed to leave the country to come back to the US because of the fear. So the school said that they'll give them a leave of absence without pay. All the rest stayed. So they've had quite a busy, that's one of the reasons on Wednesdays they have like a Saturday. They don't have a system where the teachers and the kids are getting together with breakout rooms and the light. And I was somewhat, this is obviously a private school, somewhat stunned at the amount of time that they're seeing kids and teachers woozy on the computer so much. But I was amazed as to just how much contact was being made via the computers over in Hong Kong.
That is pretty amazing, Terry. Is that 5.5 hours compensating for the teachers that have left, or is that
No, that's their day on the computers, and they have 2 daughters they go to separate rooms with their computers to go plug into their classes. And I didn't get into every little detail, but I thought that was a tremendous amount of time. However, that's life in another lane.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you for sharing. Just taking a quick look again. I think that we are good. Presentation of the warrants, and just a reminder that our next school committee meeting is not until April 30th. And we will have April vacation in between all that. And I'm sure we are all still going to be diligently working through it all. And this time would be for another option for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that I'm not aware of that would like to speak at this time. Seeing none.
One
Ooh,
comment, Tina, congratulations. Terrific article in the Chronicle about your daughter. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. She worked really hard for that. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
Mark Smith,
Yes,
CIA.
I know everybody wants to go, but just a quick public comment. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment for the district. And on the concern of sounding like a brown nose, I just think it needs to be said in a public setting. Scott deserves, as the superintendent of the district, for where we find ourselves presently, the way that we were able to launch, the vision. He pushed us as an administrative team in a very good and positive way to put us where we are. And I know he won't take the credit for it. And I know, superintendency doesn't, gets all the bad stuff tends to flow uphill, but he really, just because the committee is essentially his boss, you should all know that without his vision and his work and his drive from the very beginning, seeing that we are going to be in this position where we are, we wouldn't be where we are. So he just deserves a public recognition of that, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Mark. You're 100% correct. And yeah, it's sometimes sight unseen. And Mr. Burkhead.
Hey, everybody, Bill Burkhead, Principal, Monomoy High School. I just wanted to concur with Mark. I know, Scott's got a tough job, obviously the toughest job in the district, and we've just received overwhelmingly positive feedback from our teachers, our students, and our families. And it's not all perfect, certainly, but I think it's the best around, and we've risen to that challenge. And like Mark said, we were working weekends, nights to get this going, and Scott led the way, and no one I talked to in the educational world had the vision he had. And so I'm just fortunate to be here and want to thank him and agree completely with Mark said. We're in a real good place moving forward.
Great. And Mrs. Scott, were you waving or you were just saying, yes, you agree? All right, great. Yes. And I've said it once and I will say it again. It's just an incredible opportunity to be part of this district during this very difficult time. Goosebumps for everything you read and see about the response, the proactive response with all of our administration. I'm really proud to be part of the school committee this year and the past years, but this year especially, it almost brings me to tears because we're really making an incredible educational pathway right now and setting the bar very high. And it's just admirable to be part of that. So thank you to everyone from the top to the bottom. And Tina?
I just want to say, having a public relations background, it's been really phenomenal the way that this has been handled and Scott's vision. You always are very proactive in the way that you approach things. I so appreciate that. And, now I'm getting all teary too when you think about it, because I've been in and out of forums. Some of you that aren't on Facebook, I kind of go in and out of all these forums just so I can kind of get the temperature of what's going on in the community. And the stories, people are so just appreciative of everything. And I've been screenshotting a few things just to have and to share with people, because the comments people really appreciate this. And I'm glad to hear that the community center, I think people are recognizing what we're doing for our families. The community center, coming from Harwich, and I know Carolyn Carey and that whole staff very well. And I think everybody recognizes what's being done. And we talked about this before, we're all in this together, and kudos, Scott, and to everybody. It's just really phenomenal. So thank you.
Maybe we should be nervous that we might lose Dr. Carpenter for bigger and better things as he's out there in space right now.
Thanks. I'm quite happy. And I just want to emphasize, it's a team of administrators that helped me. I mean, these guys came in, when it was crunch time, I said, look, I need you on the weekends, and and they were in here before we had to go social distance. We were getting a draft of a plan, and then I give Sherry Armstrong and the MREA a lot of credit for for buying into that vision that, if we go maintain face-to-face, we can go and keep what's special about Monomoy going, even though we can't be together.
Incredible.
And-
All right. Oh, Tina?
I'm sorry, one more, since Bill Burkhead is here, one more thing. Bill, I caught in the Friday Focus a teacher who appeared to me to really go above and beyond. I think I was reading in the shout out section where I think she was, it must have been like on the phone with somebody for, I can't remember if it was 5 hours or 5 days, but the fact that she did that for this particular young man who I guess had so much anxiety around the technology, and I just loved it. I sent Scott a note, and I just loved reading that. So I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but really it goes with for all of our teachers, but I was especially struck by that particular one.
Great. Thank you, Tina. Mrs. Scott?
I hate to make the meeting go 1 minute longer, but can we talk a minute about the Don't Stop Believing video that the high school teachers did? It was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
They're-
haven't seen it, hopefully it's posted on the website, but if not, I saw it on Twitter, so. it
Very
was-
energetic group.
Yes. Awesome.
That was fabulous.
I can't wait to see the admins video. It's going to be great. I think Scott
Yeah,
already has a
Jackie,
theme
what-
song.
Video was it?
It was on YouTube, and then it went on to Facebook, but the high school teachers put out a great kind of
Lip
video with Don't Stop Believing, like a lip sync, and it was all cameos of all the teachers.
Oh,
Mrs.
nice.
Doyle was my
I'll look it
favorite,
up.
of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
But it was phenomenal, and the kids just think it's hysterical to see their teachers and just see them out there, and that they feel like they're all a community and everyone's kind of joined together. So it's a really cool thing.
I'm waiting until I grow out a little bit more, like get Joe's length. I mean, we got the same color going.
Yeah.
So I figured, I can get the good rock star look going if I just grow it out a little bit longer.
I
get a
can't wait.
haircut
You
now
guys
anyway.
are next. I mean, the admin team, let's just make it shine. All right, great. So I think we're at the end of our meeting, and
Move
do I
to
have a
adjourn.
motion? Do I hear a
Move to
motion?
adjourn.
I move we adjourn tonight.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Second?
Second.
Great. And I have to do a roll call. Joe,
Aye.
I am in favor of my motion.
Joanne,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Sharon,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Miss Scott.
Yes.
I'm all over the place tonight. Tina.
Hi.
All right, great. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned at 9:38 p.m. Hang in there, everybody, and have a great April vacation.
You too, Jackie. Good job.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
See ya.
I don't know how to get out.
Go to the door.
Oh, there it is. Bye.
What door?
Here we go.
Still stuck.
Hit the X.
Stuck
Up at-
in the video. There it is. Leave
Up
meeting.
here.
Bye-bye.
And then hit the X in the top right corner.